The wind was speaking when they first saw it. A shivering whisper through broken shutters, carrying the scent of rain and salt from the cliffs below. The mansion loomed ahead like something that had been waiting too long to be found. Its windows blind, its heart asleep. $1, Mara murmured, tracing her fingers along the rusted gate. There has to be a reason. Elias only smiled, holding up the tarnished skeleton key the realtor had left behind, dangling from a black ribbon. It was cold in his hand, too cold. When the gate swung open on its own, the sound was less a creak and more a sigh. Inside, the air shimmered faintly, and the first door they tried revealed not a room, but the smell of lilacs and the sound of a clock that hadn't ticked in years. The air inside seemed to breathe with them, exhaling dust and secrets. Every board creaked as though it remembered footsteps long gone. Mara's voice was soft. It smells like the ocean forgot this place. She moved through the hall, her fingertips brushing along faded wallpaper, where faint, swirling vines had once been painted in gold. Elias followed, eyes drawn to the walls where portraits hung, faces blurred by time. One frame was empty, its glass cracked. Beneath it, a small brass key dangled on a hook, as if waiting. He took it before he knew why, its metal pulse faintly warm against his palm. Somewhere above, a door shut on its own. They found the grand staircase, its banister coiled like a serpent carved from oak. Mara leaned down, brushing dust from a step, revealing initials etched into the wood. M.W., though neither of them had been here before. That's impossible, Elias whispered, his breath visible in the chill. A low hum vibrated through the floor, so subtle it could have been imagined. Then from the landing above came the sound of gentle humming, a woman's voice, distant yet familiar. Mara looked up, frozen. Elias whispered, "Do you hear it too?" The hum stopped instantly. Only silence remained, but something unseen had heard them back. That night, they made a fire in the cracked hearth of what might once have been a music room. The flames bent strangely, curling sideways as if drawn toward unseen drafts. Mara painted in her sketchbook by candlelight, trying to capture the way the mansion seemed to twist itself in silence. "It feels like it's watching," she said without looking up. Elias sat at an antique desk, the brass key beside his notebook. "Maybe it is." His words were light, but his hand trembled slightly when the clock above the mantel began to tick, though they'd never wound it. Just before sleep, Elias woke to the sound of soft footsteps above. The room was blue with moonlight, the air sharp with salt. He sat up, listening. The rhythm was wrong, too measured. Like someone pacing the hallway. Mara stirred, murmuring his name. "It's just the sea," she said, though her eyes stayed open. He rose quietly, following the sound up the winding stairs. Every step creaked like a heartbeat. At the top, the hall stretched impossibly long, lined with identical doors. The brass key in his hand glowed faintly again. He tried one door. The lock turned, and a faint rush of wind came through from somewhere that wasn't this world. The door opened into sunlight. Not the thin gray dawn of the coast, but golden afternoon, rich with warmth and the sound of bees. Elias stepped forward and felt his stomach drop. The hallway was gone. In its place stood a garden he almost remembered. A white fence, a stone path, and a younger version of himself kneeling by a rose bush beside Mara, her laughter echoing like a memory he could taste. But this wasn't their past. The other Elias looked up and met his eyes, calm and curious, as if seeing a reflection made of breath. Mara's hand tightened on his shoulder. "You shouldn't have opened it," she whispered. Behind them, the key trembled in the lock, as though alive. The garden dissolved when the younger Mara turned her head and saw them. The world folded like paper petals, scattering into air that felt suddenly hollow. Elias stumbled backward. grasping Mara's wrist as the door slammed itself shut behind them. They were back in the hall, but the wallpaper had changed. The portraits were no longer blurred. Their own faces now hung among them, painted in styles from decades apart. Mara's painted likeness wore mourning black, her eyes vacant. Elias's painted hand held the same brass key. The realization crawled through his chest. Every door might lead to a life they had never lived, but each had already imagined. Mara found the caretaker in the kitchen at dawn. He stood perfectly still beside an old iron stove, polishing silver that gleamed, though the room was untouched by light. "Why are there doors to other lives?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Because this house remembers choices," he said quietly. "Every regret leaves a door behind." When she blinked, he was gone. Only the faint ring of a keychain left on the table. Elias entered moments later, holding a new key they hadn't found before, small, carved with a symbol like an eye. "It was under our bed," he said. Neither asked how it had gotten there. That evening, rain began without warning. Elias insisted on unlocking the new door. Mara tried to stop him, but the hum had returned, that low vibration that made the walls seem to breathe. The key turned smoothly, too smoothly, and cold air spilled into the room, carrying the scent of rain and smoke. On the other side was the same house, but burned and hollow, lit by stormlight through shattered rafters. In that ruin stood another Mara, her hair streaked with ash, staring out the window at nothing. "She's not me," Mara whispered, though her voice trembled. The other one turned, her eyes the color of rain clouds, and whispered back, "Not yet." They sealed the door and sat in silence, the storm raging outside like something alive. The fire had died, leaving only the crackle of distant thunder. Elias stared at the brass key, its surface slowly darkening as if tarnished by unseen hands. "What if the house isn't showing us other worlds?" he said finally. "What if it's showing us endings?" Mara's eyes shimmered in the dying glow. "Then we have to find the one that isn't ours yet." The caretaker's voice came from nowhere, calm and cold. "Every key fits more than one door. Choose carefully." And then came the faint click of another lock turning, somewhere deep within the walls. Morning came gray and heavy, the air thick with the scent of rain and something metallic. Mara awoke alone, the bed cold beside her. The keys that once lay on the nightstand were gone, except one, the eye-carved key. It seemed to hum faintly when she touched it, as though alive with her pulse. Down the hall, a mirror leaned crookedly against the wall, its glass veiled with dust. When she approached, her reflection moved before she did. It smiled faintly, a small, knowing curve that didn't belong to her. "You've already opened it," her reflection whispered. The sound came from behind the glass, not the room. The mirror began to fog from the inside. Elias returned from the cellar to find Mara standing before the mirror, her fingertips pressed against the glass. "Don't touch it," he said sharply, but she didn't move. Her reflection was moving without her now, lifting its own hand to the other side of the glass. When he stepped closer, he saw something behind that reflected version of her, himself, staring back, expression blank. The sound of rushing air filled the hall, and the floorboards trembled as though the house were inhaling. Mara's lips parted. "It's not showing us," she said softly. "It's waiting for us." Then the mirror cracked in a perfect circle, like a keyhole forming from within. When the mirror shattered, it didn't fall. It scattered into floating shards, each holding a different image. Elias saw flashes of himself writing in a study that no longer existed, of Mara laughing beside a man who wasn't him, of the mansion crumbling in reverse. The air shimmered with faint whispers, each piece humming with a voice half familiar. Mara reached for one shard, and the reflection inside blinked. "Don't," Elias said. But her fingers brushed it, and she vanished, pulled into a swirl of mirrored light that collapsed inward like a closing eye. The sound that followed was silence, thick and absolute. The only thing left was the eye-shaped key lying on the floor. The house was quiet now. Too quiet. Elias moved through rooms that seemed slightly wrong. Hallways that turned where they shouldn't. Portraits that smiled when he passed. He called her name again and again. His voice swallowed by the walls. The eye key lay heavy in his pocket, warm like a heartbeat. When he reached the parlor, he found the caretaker waiting by the cold fireplace. "You've lost her between mirrors," the old man said, his tone flat, ancient. "To find her, you must step through the one that shows nothing at all." Elias turned, scanning the room. Every mirror reflected something, except the one over the mantel, black and empty, like an unblinking pupil. Elias pressed the eye key into the black mirror's frame. It fit perfectly, as though made for this moment. The glass rippled, not like water, but like a breathing lung. He hesitated, hearing his own heartbeat echo twice, once from within himself, and once from the other side. "Mara," he whispered, and the mirror whispered it back, perfectly in her voice. He stepped forward, the glass swallowing him whole without a sound. The parlor fell still. The caretaker watched, expression unreadable, then turned toward the door and extinguished every candle with a wave of his hand. Darkness folded the room like a closing book. Darkness folded the room like a closing book. Elias fell through nothing. The air itself was liquid, heavy, shimmering like oil over water. When he landed, it wasn't a crash, but a slow arrival, as though gravity had forgotten its purpose. He stood inside the same mansion, but reversed, its walls gleaming with a faint metallic sheen. Every candle flame burning downward instead of up. Footsteps echoed, though he made none. In the mirror world, sound traveled before action, memory before breath. "Mara?" he called, and his voice arrived late, warped and stretched. A door creaked open on its own, revealing the faint outline of a woman walking away through silver light. She didn't turn when he shouted her name. He followed the figure through corridors that shifted underfoot. Every door led to a version of the same room, rearranged in impossible geometry. Tables on ceilings, windows opening into starless voids, mirrors that blinked like eyes. At last, he reached a study that mirrored his own from home. On the desk lay his notebook, open to a page he hadn't written yet. "She's behind the fifth reflection." His hand trembled as he touched the ink. It was still wet. Somewhere, the air vibrated with a hum, low and mournful. He turned, and through the mirror on the wall saw Mara's face, pressed against the other side of the glass, whispering soundless words he couldn't read. He searched for the fifth reflection, counting mirrors as he passed. One in the hall, two in the stairwell, a third broken, a fourth vobbed with frost. The fifth hung at the end of a narrow corridor, lit by blue light that had no source. It was taller than the rest, framed in tarnished silver etched with vines. As he approached, the mirror flickered between scenes. Different rooms, different worlds. In one, Mara was asleep beside him in their real bed. In another, the house burned while he stood outside. Then the glass stilled, revealing only his own face. Older, hollow, eyes black with exhaustion. The reflection lifted its hand before he did and whispered, "You don't belong here." Then the mirror cracked down the center, like a vein of lightning. The crack widened until light poured out of it, filling the corridor with a blinding brilliance. Elias shielded his eyes, stumbling backward, and when his vision cleared, the hallway was gone. He stood in a vast ballroom, empty, gleaming, endless. The floor mirrored the ceiling so perfectly that he could not tell which was which. In the center stood Mara, barefoot, dressed in gray silk that moved like smoke. "You came through," she said softly, her voice both near and far. "But this place doesn't give things back." Elias took a step toward her, and their reflections moved differently, as if the world beneath them had made a choice neither could undo. They reached for each other, and the floor trembled. Reflections splintered outward in slow motion, every shard showing them at different points in their lives, meeting for the first time, arguing in the rain, laughing on their wedding night, grieving beside a coffin. Each fragment pulsed with unbearable truth. "These are all us," Mara whispered, tears glinting like glass. Elias nodded, voice breaking. "But which one is real?" The caretaker's voice echoed faintly through the infinite mirrors. "Reality belongs to the one who lets go first." The reflections began to dissolve, one by one, until only their present selves remained, standing on a thin line of light between nothing and forever. The light beneath their feet dimmed, and silence thickened around them like fog. From that silence came a sound, slow, deliberate footsteps, echoing without source. The ballroom's mirrored walls began to darken, absorbing their reflections until only two figures remained. The caretaker stepped out from the dark, his polished shoes never disturbing the surface. "You've seen what the house remembers," he said. "Now you must decide which memory becomes truth." Elias turned toward him, eyes fierce. "We just want to go home." The old man smiled faintly. "Then tell me, which home do you mean?" Behind him the mirrors pulsed softly, each one holding a doorway to a different life. Mara stepped forward, her reflection moving differently, slower, like something caught in syrup. "You knew this would happen," she said to the caretaker. "You wanted us to open the doors." His eyes gleamed with quiet amusement. "The house wanted. I merely tend it." Elias clenched his fists. "Why us?" "Because you paid the price," he replied. $1 for the house, one truth for your souls." The floor beneath them rippled, revealing countless doors below, each glowing faintly like buried embers. "Every choice," the caretaker continued, "is a room waiting to be unlocked. Every regret feeds the house." His gaze shifted to Mara. "And you, my dear, have many." Elias looked down and saw, within the glass floor, a reflection of himself kneeling beside Mara's coffin. The sight stole his breath. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "That never happened." "Not yet," said the caretaker, "but it could. The house keeps every ending close." Mara's hand gripped his tightly, her pulse frantic. "We can't stay here," she said. "If we choose one, we lose all the rest." Elias turned to her, voice raw. "Maybe that's what living means." For a moment, the mirrors stilled, every reflection watching, holding its breath. Then the caretaker reached into his coat and produced a single key, black as obsidian. "One door," he said softly. "Only one will bring you back." The key weighed nothing and everything all at once. Elias took it, feeling its cold hum vibrate through his bones. The caretaker stepped back, fading slightly, his form flickering like a candle in wind. "Whichever door you choose," he said, "the others will close forever. No one remembers what they didn't choose." Mara's hand trembled as she pointed to one mirror, glowing faintly gold. Inside, they saw a version of themselves in the same house, sunlight pouring through open windows, laughing over breakfast. It looked so ordinary it hurt. Elias turned to her, voice low. "If we go there, will we remember this?" She shook her head. "No, but maybe we'll be happy." Elias slid the black key into the golden mirror's edge. The glass quivered like water before a storm. He turned it once, and the world began to unmake itself. The mirrors shattered inward, folding light into sound, sound into nothing. The caretaker's voice echoed as he vanished. All houses remember their owners. Mara gripped Elias' hand tighter as the golden light consumed them. For an instant, he saw every version of her. Painter, ghost, bride, stranger, each fading one by one until only the woman beside him remained. The mansion sighed, walls contracting, doors sealing. Then silence, just two shadows stepping into sunlight, unaware of the echoes they left behind. Elias woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of waves. Morning sunlight slanted through clean windows, glinting off polished wood. For a long moment he didn't move, afraid that breathing might break it. The mansion, no, the house, was whole again. No cracks, no dust, no mirrors. Mara stood by the counter, barefoot, humming softly as she poured 2 cups. Her hair caught the light like flame. "We made it," she said, smiling. A real smile this time. But when Elias reached for his cup, he noticed the faint reflection in the coffee's surface, not himself, but the version who had watched him from the mirror. Older, hollow-eyed and smiling back. The spoon in his hand trembled. They spent the day exploring, half afraid to touch anything. The paintings were gone, replaced with sunlight and clean walls. The air was warm, not damp. Outside, gulls cried over a calm sea. Elias knelt by the front door and ran his fingers over the keyhole. Empty. "It's really over," Mara said softly. But as she turned, a shadow crossed the hall. For an instant, she saw herself at the far end. Same face, same dress, standing perfectly still, eyes unblinking. Then the figure vanished. Elias didn't see it, though his reflection in the window turned its head as if it had. That evening, Mara painted again. The canvas was blank for hours before her hand began to move on its own, guided by something unseen. The brushstrokes flowed fast and sure, forming the faint outline of a mirror. When she realized what it was, she tried to stop, but her hand wouldn't obey. "Elias," she cried, the paint dripping like ink across her wrist. He rushed in and froze. The painting now showed them both standing in the ballroom again, surrounded by endless mirrors. Only this time the reflection of Mara in the painting was turning toward him, slowly, deliberately, though her real body stood perfectly still. Night fell heavy and silent. They tried to sleep, but the house hummed faintly, that low vibration they both remembered. Mara woke first, heart pounding. The bedroom mirror they'd removed now stood in the corner, upright and clean. Elias stirred beside her, whispering her name, but his voice came from the mirror, not the bed. She sat up, trembling. The figure in the glass was Elias, yes, but his lips were still moving after he'd stopped speaking. "It's not me," he whispered beside her. In the mirror, his double smiled faintly and raised the black obsidian key. At dawn, the house was empty again, the bed untouched, the fire out, the air still. The caretaker's voice drifted faintly through the silence. "All houses remember their owners." In the parlor mirror, sunlight revealed 2 faint impressions, a man's hand and a woman's, pressed against the glass from within. Outside, gulls wheeled over the cliffs, and the front door creaked open slowly in the breeze. On the kitchen table, a single coin lay waiting. Tarnished silver, stamped with the image of an eye. Weeks later, the mansion stood empty, its windows clean and bright, yet at night, lights flickered across its upper floors, as if someone walked the halls with a lantern. The locals whispered again, about voices behind the glass, about laughter that stopped too suddenly. In town, an estate sign reappeared on the iron gate for sale. $1. No one dared to touch it, except for a passing traveler who swore he saw 2 shadows moving together beyond the windows, turning keys that gleamed gold. And though the sea wind should have drowned all sound, he could have sworn he heard a woman say, "We found the right door this time." Inside, Time had folded neatly. The halls looked exactly as they did the day they arrived. Yet the dust never settled. Elias stood before the great oak door they'd first unlocked, the one that sighed open all those nights ago. "There's still one left," he murmured. Mara stepped beside him, her expression calm now, almost serene. "Then we open it together." The brass key they'd thought was lost lay waiting in the keyhole, cold but pulsing faintly. When he turned it, the door opened not into another world, but into a mirror. Vast, rippling, endless. It showed no reflection at all. The mirror's surface rippled outward, and they stepped through hand in hand. For an instant, they saw everything. Every room, every life, every choice collapsing inward, like pages of a closing book. The mansion around them began to fade, walls melting into fog. Elias felt the ground fall away, but Mara's hand remained steady. "It doesn't matter which world it is," she whispered, "only that we're in it together." He smiled faintly, and the light around them bent into warmth, into color, into the sound of wind through open windows. When they exhaled, the world exhaled with them. When the light faded, they stood in the same room, or one that remembered being it. Everything was softer, quieter. The air smelled of lilacs and rain. Outside the windows, the ocean shimmered under a sky they didn't recognize. Mara touched the wall. Her hand left no mark. Elias walked to the door, opened it, and found no corridor beyond. Only a long meadow, green and endless. "Do you think it's real?" she asked. He turned, smiling gently. "I think it's ours." Together, they stepped into the wind, and behind them, the house exhaled one last sigh. Not sorrow, but release. By evening, the mansion was gone. The cliffs where it had stood were covered in wildflowers, untouched stone, and silence. Only the iron gate remained, its hinges unmoving, its latch bound shut by a single black ribbon. Locals passing by sometimes swear they see light over the meadow at dusk, golden, flickering, like reflections on water. They say it's the sun, or perhaps memory itself. But if you stand long enough and listen, you might hear two voices in the wind, distant and laughing. And if you find a brass key half buried in the grass, best to leave it. Some doors remember who opened them.